Hello and welcome to a short Asiamet update video on today's news. My name is Sasha Sethi and I'm joined by Fuad Salem from our investor relations team and of course Tony Manini, Executive Chairman of Asiamet. So without further ado, over to Tony, whom I might ask to provide further detail on the deal, perhaps beginning with a background to the structure relating to the heads of terms with PT WIN for the sale of the KSK contract of work, which also holds Asiamet's development stage BKM copper project. In Tony's words, a very significant transaction for the company.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. So maybe before I get into the detail in respect of the deal itself, I'll just go back a little bit and provide a bit of context in sort of, how we've got to this position. So firstly, as shareholders, listeners will know, Asiamet completed the feasibility study on its BKM copper project, which sits on the contract, the KSK contract of work, mid 2019. And since then, we've been very much focused on doing a number of things, but primarily progressing the permitting for the development of that project. Secondly, undertaking some value enhancement work. And thirdly, and most importantly, which is where this transaction comes in, securing a strategic funding partner for the development of BKM copper project. Now, we started a process in the back half of last year to secure a strategic funding partner. It has been part of our long-term strategy. We're a 100% holder of the contract of work, and we've always said that at the point that we got to the feasibility study, taking the project through to construction into development, that we would be looking to introduce a strategic partner. We have run a process and, we had strong interest in that process. We had a number of groups visit site, do detailed diligence. We commenced engagement with Aeturnum Energy as part of that process late last year. Aeturnum had a strategy whereby, they were looking to diversify their commodities trading business into direct mining investments, predominantly related to the, EV and green energy thematic, looking for commodities to trade and diversify their energy trading business. So we liked the strategy that they were running with. And we liked, the aspects of how they were proposing to take that forward. This culminated in Aeturnum taking a strategic placement in the company back in March. We then entered a 60-day due diligence period, exclusive due diligence period with Aeturnum. They undertook their work. At the end of that 60 days, they successfully got through the diligence, and we then commenced the negotiating period. And that's really where we've landed today with this heads of agreement. So I'll just run through the highlights of this heads of agreement. So it involves the sale of the contract of work, the KSK contract of work, which holds the BKM copper project, into PT WIN. PT WIN is an Indonesian private company that's wholly owned by Aeturnum Energy. And that private company, PT WIN, is acquiring both the commodities trading business from Aeturnum Energy International and also acquiring the KSK contract of work from our local subsidiary, Asiamet's local subsidiary, Indokal. The acquisition of the KSK contract of work via Indokal is for a total payment of $163 million. The intention is for that combined entity to then progress to undertake initial public offering, an IPO, on the Indonesian Stock Exchange in 2021, late in the first quarter or early in the second quarter of 2021. So that's the sort of broad terms. In terms of the HOA itself and how that $163 million is broken down, there's three key parts to the transaction. So the first is a $10 million cash payment to be made to Asiamet on execution of the sales and purchases agreement. The binding sales and purchase agreement we will look to complete that and have that signed in approximately 30 days. That's a non-refundable $10 million payment, which essentially, if the deal doesn't progress further, becomes essentially a break fee. Upon the successful IPO of PT WIN, there's also a $40 million cash payment to Asiamet, so $50 million in total of cash payments to Asiamet. We will also, at the time of the IPO, hold a 22.5% equity position in PT WIN. So a 22.5% shareholding in the listed PT WIN, which holds those two assets that I referred to earlier, being the commodities trading business and the BKM copper project. I think very importantly, a couple of, one of the key items is that $30 million of the IPO proceeds will be committed towards the ongoing development of the BKM project. So, when we set aside $30 million from the IPO together with the cash on hand from the commodities trading business, this will very much enable the funding pathway for the development of BKM. Probably one other thing worth mentioning is that at any time between now and the IPO, and for a short fixed period beyond the IPO, PT WIN can acquire 100% of the contract of work from us for the $163 million in cash. So that's it in summary, Sasha, in terms of the transaction.
Thanks, Tony. So not so long ago, you outlined three main objectives which you are aiming to fulfill during your negotiations with Aeturnum in relation to the deal. Would you say that you've met these objectives now as part of the deal?
Oh, very much so, Sasha. So just as a reminder of those three key items, the first one was to see, the Asiamet corporate funded such that it wasn't reliant on coming back to the market to sustain the business. The second of those was to see the BKM project funded. And the third of those was that we retained a substantial shareholding in the BKM project going forward. So I think, as I've outlined, I think this deal achieves that really in spades. We have $50 million coming into the Asiamet corporate through the transaction. We have $30 million of the IPO proceeds plus the funds from the trading business available to essentially put together the equity component, which will strengthen the position to put together a debt package and ultimately pave the way for the development of the BKM copper project. And thirdly, we retain a 22.5% stake in a business that's valued at $500 million on IPO. So we've got a very meaningful stake in the PT WIN business at 22.5%. The Asiamet management team will continue to manage and operate the development of the BKM for a period of time, initially a transitional period of circa 12 months, but we will be deeply involved in continuing the work that's currently underway there and continuing to support that business in putting the financing package together and ultimately the team together and moving that project into construction and operation. So I think, Sasha, to answer the question, absolutely this transaction achieves all of those, and hence, the reason that I very much refer to this as a transformational transaction. I think it's achieved all the things we set out to achieve and more. Look, there's still a lot of work to do, and it's not without some risk, but ultimately the structure and the successful execution of this structure will enable all of those things in spades.
Thanks, Tony. Certainly a major transaction. Could you give us a bit more background of the process of today's announcement and also walk us through the timeline to complete this major transaction?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Look, obviously with a transaction of this magnitude, the Asiamet board really needed to get a high degree of confidence in a number of things. Firstly, They needed to be confident in the counterparty, being AE, Aeturnum Energy, and its strategy. They needed to get confidence in the integrity of the valuations that have been put forward for the businesses, and that's both businesses. So Aeturnum's trading business and also, our own business. So the valuations were obviously, highly critical to that. And thirdly was really the executability and deliverability of the IPO. I mean, that's a critical part of the transaction, which will enable all of the things that we've just talked about to happen. So we had to be confident that, it could be executed and it could be delivered. They're all fundamental issues really relevant to the success of this transaction. So over the past couple of months, the management team at Asiamet, James, myself, and the rest of the team, we've been systematically working with Asiamet, with Aeturnum and its, range of corporate advisors and our own corporate advisors, covering the full spectrum of things, technical, legal, commercial, financial, and anything relevant to the transaction, including the independent valuers. And I'll just note that, we've used here some of the most, highly credible, highly respected independent company valuers in Indonesia to put these valuations together and hence the foundations of the transaction. Obviously, we've had to be working with regulators. So there's regulators both in Indonesia and through our listing. We've had to work with Indonesian securities firms. So, the IPO will be on the IDX, so Indonesian securities firm, and we've engaged with those that have been selected to run with this IPO and as potential underwriters to the IPO. So a lot of work, a lot of people involved, and a lot of professional entities, organisations that we've had to work with to get that level of confidence to enter into the transaction. So look, while much of the work still while there's still much work to be finalised, the Asiamet board, as I said, very clearly aligned and strongly aligned with the AE strategy for PT WIN and business. We've got a high level of confidence now that the IPO is executable, and particularly at or near the valuations that we've outlined. We've done a lot of work around that. And thirdly, really in the timeframes that are proposed. So, while there's challenges at the moment, as everybody be aware with, COVID-19 and the restrictions that entails, we do think that these timelines are readily achievable. We initially set out that we thought we may be able to get this done this year, but given the context and the background we're working to, we feel comfortable that late in the first quarter or early second quarter is a readily doable timeline. So, as a consequence of all of that, the Asiamet board, strongly endorse entering into this, heads of agreement, pushing ahead with the binding SPA over the next 30 days or so, and then, pushing forward and executing on the full transaction. So a lot of work's gone into it, Fuad. In terms of the timeline, I'll just hit the high points here. As I said, the heads of agreement due to be signed, or has been signed, just now. We've got a number of regulatory approvals that we need to get through. I mentioned, we're working with the underwriters on valuations. While we've had independent valuations done, we still need to work with the securities firms and the underwriters to settle on those valuations, but we don't expect them to be too much different to where we've landed at this point. And we've had preliminary transactions with them to shore those convictions up. There's obviously quite a lot of documentation in terms of the formal legal documents to put together for the sales and purchases agreement, which this heads of agreement fundamentally leads into. And then we'll look to execute that, as I said, at the end of, around in 30 days' time from now, there plus or minus a little bit. And then we'll have to go to shareholder approval. I mean, it's a material transaction for the company. We are, effectively selling a major asset of the company, as I've outlined. So we'll require shareholder approval. We'll then go into formal IPO documentation, the marketing and the roadshow, and with a target IPO date, as I said, late in the first quarter, early second quarter next year. So that's the background, that's the timetable to where we're headed for it.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Just turning into shareholders, this transaction values the KSK contract of work at a multiple of today's market capitalization. What other benefits are there for shareholders from this deal? And could you perhaps talk us through what Asiamet will look like post-completion of this transaction, Tony?
Yeah, okay. Look, thanks, Fuad. Look, and a good question. I mean, firstly, although it's multiples of the current share price, I've always, I've been pretty adamant that there was substantial value to be unlocked from Asiamet, and the intrinsic value of the assets were, well beyond what the market was valuing at. And I think, the fact that we've had independent valuers and we've entered into a transaction with a pretty smart group of people that have put a valuation on the business at these levels, would suggest that what I was saying actually had some merit. So, while it's multiples of the market cap, what I would suggest is that it provides very fair value for the KSK contract of work, and it unlocks significant value for our shareholders. So, that's very important. I did say, we wanted to maintain a meaningful exposure to the contract of work, and we've been able to do that. We will be able to do that through our 22.5% ownership. I think very importantly, it strengthens the balance sheet for the company. We've been a small junior company, very dependent upon equity raisings, small equity raisings on the market, and this will really strengthen up our balance sheet and enable us to, both diversify our business. So diversification equals de-risking, and provides a growth platform really for Asiamet to continue to execute the strategy that we've set for the company and to grow a very substantial copper gold business. I think one of the key things also that I haven't mentioned, Fuad, along this afternoon is that the Indonesian ownership requirements are also satisfied by this transaction. We were a 100% owned business. There are requirements under the Indonesian legislation to ultimately sell down to Indonesian ownership, and this transaction achieves that Indonesian ownership requirement at fair value to Asiamet shareholders. So I think it's a win-win in that respect. I think critically important for stakeholders, shareholders, the Indonesian government, the communities in which we work, is really that it enables the pathway for the development of the project. As I said, $30 million of IPO proceeds going towards that development. The cash flows from the trading business, plus cash at hand, and those IPO proceeds largely de-risks that development path. It enables a large part of the equity to be put together. It enables the work that needs to be done to get done, and it puts us in a solid position to put together the debt funding package, which ultimately sees the project move then into the construction and operations phase. So unlocks a lot of value for shareholders there, and we'll retain a 22.5% exposure to that. As I said, our team will still be involved in doing that, so we'll have, we'll be able to influence those outcomes and ensure that that continues to happen. And, our value enhancement and development permitting that we're currently undertaking will continue uninterrupted. So that's, they're major benefits for our shareholders as well. I think the last piece really, Fuad, that I'll just touch on is that, what this enables us to do then is to all of those things that I've just talked about in terms of the BKM project and the KSK contract of work, but it also enables us to start to think about how we're going to unlock value from, our big Butong porphyry copper deposit. We're in a relatively stronger market now for copper. Big copper deposits on the doorstep of Asia enabled by, good infrastructure are very, very rare. We've got one of those very few opportunities. There's quite a bit more activity with people looking for these types of opportunities. So I think, we can now start to look at, okay, well, how do we get broader, how do we daylight some of this value? How do we attract a strategic development partner for that big project? And how we best take that forward? So that's, with all our resources have pretty much gone into BKM for the last few years. So we'll be able to, start to unlock some of that value that's at Butong. And I think it also provides an opportunity for Asiamet to pursue additional value creating growth opportunities in copper and gold. We'll look at other things in Indonesia. We'll look at things outside Indonesia. We'll look at things across the spectrum, where there's potentially an early stage exploration project where we see huge upside that we can extract. We'll look at, development ready projects that can be taken into production, and, we'll potentially look at operating assets which already have some cash flow and can be grown. So look, as I said, it provides a lot of diversification for the business and a platform for us to grow. And I think, it's captured in all of those pieces that I've just outlined.
Tony, picking up on what you mentioned about the ongoing value enhancement and permitting work at BKM continuing uninterrupted, and for shareholders whom I know will be asking, I'm just wondering if you could go into a bit more detail there.
Yeah, no worries, Sasha. So, look, as shareholders will be aware, a couple of months ago, we hired Andrew Neal, who's a minerals processing engineer, to essentially run the value enhancement program. Andrew's been on board for a couple of months. We were fortunate that we initially felt that we initially thought we would have to drill some additional holes to get samples to do some further test work on. Through the good work of Mansour and Steve Hughes, we had drill core still in refrigerated containers up in Kalimantan. We were able to get that material out of the refrigerated containers. You might ask, why do you keep rock drill core in refrigerated containers? It's to stop the oxidation process taking place. So these are sulfide minerals. It's to stop those sulfide minerals oxidizing. So by keeping them in that cold environment, they don't readily oxidize. And you need to have those materials in pristine condition for the test work to actually make sense and give you reliable results. Fortunately, we had the drill core still there. We were able to resample that drill core, put together some composites. Those composites have gone into the lab in Indonesia. All that work's been overseen by Andrew, and it's currently progressing as we speak. That work's happening at the same time. We've got engaged some of the sort of world's best experts in copper leaching involved in looking how we may be able to refine things and do things a little differently, a little better, recover far more copper from the process and reduce the size of the footprint of the actual mining operation itself. And by that I mean producing a flotation concentrate and then leaching the flotation concentrate. So the concentrate reduces the volume very significantly, and we leach a much smaller amount of material than we otherwise would on a whole of ore leach, where you essentially dig up and leach the whole of the mineralized material. Here we will take the 0.6% copper and concentrate it to much higher levels. I don't know what those levels will be, but for the sake of this conversation, let's call it, we'll concentrate that up to somewhere around the sort of 8 to 10%. So you can imagine that greatly reduces the amount of volume that you're actually leaching, and then we'll leach that material in much lower volumes, which has a smaller footprint in terms of its impact, the amount of water you have to manage, and many other aspects, environmental and operational aspects of the project. So a lot of work going on in that area, overseen by Andrew and some real experts in this business. So we expect that that work will continue uninterrupted, as I said, and we'll be reporting on that as we go forward over the next few months. And of course, the development permitting work continues as well. led by our, very capable local Indonesian team. And, there's a number of milestones to be hit in the forestry permit, getting the forestry permit, the construction permits, and the various sub-permits that sort of feed into that. So pretty strong news flow still to come over the remainder of the year, as well as that, obviously the progression of the transaction that we've just talked about, Sasha. So, a lot happening in the business, and, we'll continue to report on all of that as we go forward. Exciting times ahead, and really looking forward to getting on with it now that we've got a clearly defined path forward.
Tony, thank you very much for this update and your time, and we look forward to seeing Asiamet progress during this exciting phase of the company's development and seeing out this transaction. Thanks again for your time. Thanks,
Sasha. Thanks, Fuad. It's good to be able to get the opportunity to give a run through and give shareholders some background to the transaction and the work that we've got underway and what it means for the company. So thanks again, guys.